Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be talking about my C-section, my experience, all during a pandemic. So I'm a new mum of a 3-month-old, and I had an elective C-section because he was growing a bit bigger than the average baby. So I'm just going to talk about my experience with that and why I went for an elective C-section. So my options were, when I got to about 35 weeks, they discovered that my baby was growing a bit heavier than most babies, than the average baby. So by 40 weeks, he would have weighed over 9 pounds. So they wanted to induce me at 39 weeks. They gave me the option for an induced labour. This would be me being induced and it taking up to 12 hours for the actual labour to begin, forcing my body to go into labour if it wasn't ready already. So I asked about a C-section, an elective C-section, what would that look like? It was an option for me. And when I discussed it with the midwife and the doctor, they said that I could have an elective C-section if it was my choice, but it's a very big procedure. So it'd be up to me if I wanted to put my body through that. So after debating it back and forth and talking to my partner about it, I decided to go for an elective C-section because I knew I would be more stressed with an induced labour because it's forcing my body to do something that it's not ready for. And because I've never experienced labour before, I was already anxious about it and I know I'd be super stressed. And I thought, if I'm stressed, the baby's going to be stressed and it would just be too much. So being as organised as I was in the lead up to the birth, planning what I needed to get in and just a big Amazon wish list, I thought it would be more structured for me and make me feel more comfortable to have an elective C-section where I have a set date and that I go in and I know that my baby's going to come at that time. So he was a week early from the 40 weeks. He was born at 39 weeks in May. So on that time, the day I was meant to go in for my C-section, I called at 6 a.m. They said to me to come in by about 7:30 because they tell you on the day if you can go in the morning or the afternoon, depending on what their availability is. So went in there with my partner during the pandemic. It was all very clinical. Everyone's wearing masks and PPE, very, very sanitary in there, which was really nice and very quiet. So we were in a room with another couple who were waiting to go in for their C-section for their third child. So we were discussing a bit about that, with what it was like for them on the first 2 times around. The lady had an emergency C-section at one point. And that was what I was worried for, if I had an induced labour, if I went through all of that stress to then just have a C-section at the end of it. So I thought I'd just cut out the middleman, just go straight for the C-section. So we spoke to them and then we waited a few hours, and then at about 11:30, 11:25, I went next door to the theatre room and I was in a dressing gown, some very ugly compression socks, to manage blood clots or potential blood clots anyway. Went into theatre, sat on the bed, hunched over the bed and sitting upright, and they placed needles in my back for numbing agents so that my lower half would become numb, so that they could, open up my womb, get a little man out. So during that time, they were all really lovely in the hospital, but it was just a bit strange because you're just sitting on this table, needles going in the back, a bit painful, but gets less painful as more needles go in because you've got more numbing agents going in there. Then I laid on the bed and then slowly felt my bottom half just become numb and I couldn't feel anything. At that point, it was just all a bit strange. They sprayed with cold spray to compare the top part of my body to the bottom part to make sure that I really couldn't feel anything, because the last thing they want is to start cutting you open, you feel bits that are going on down there. So with the actual procedure, I didn't feel any pain, but I felt tugging of where they were cutting me open, moving around, getting my baby out. But obviously I couldn't see anything. I didn't want to see anything. So they had a sheet up. And when my baby was born, 10 minutes in, it was very quick on getting my baby out. And then the longer part just took of stitching me up and just repairing everything in there. So once my baby was out, I heard him crying, and they went and cleaned him up and then they brought him over. They gave me the option, once they pulled him out, to lower the curtain so I could see him as soon as he came out of my stomach. But I wasn't brave enough to face that. I didn't want to see what was open down there. So they took him, cleaned him up. My partner cleaned him up with the midwife and brought him over, and we could see him. My arms felt very strange because I could just feel the tugging sensation all in my stomach. So I didn't hold him initially, but my partner, really lovely, held him up so I could see him and just touch him and stuff like that. Because I just felt very strange, everything going on my bottom half. I had a bit of a weakness at the top part, so I was scared I was going to drop him or anything like that. But after that was done, stitched me up. They then moved me from the theatre table to my bed. So once they did that, it was all very strange because you just can't move. You can't help them move yourself or anything like that. And once I was on the bed, I had my baby on my chest for a lot of skin to skin. And that was so lovely. It was just really, I was just overjoyed, little thing you've been growing in your stomach for 9 months. And then all of a sudden they're there. And then I couldn't have imagined what he'd look like, but he was just absolutely perfect. And then went to the next room, like the recovery room, during the pandemic, because my partner could spend a couple of hours with me before we then had to move to the maternity ward where he wasn't allowed to come, just because of COVID-19. They're just being very strict about people coming in and out of the wards, and especially with the maternity unit anyway. But we had a couple of hours. My baby was very hungry 20 minutes into being born, into the world. He was 20 minutes in, and I initially tried breastfeeding. So he latched on, and it was perfect. He was feeding. It was just a magical experience. Breastfeeding, by the way, if you're pregnant or you just want to know a bit about breastfeeding, it's the strangest feeling ever. But when they latch correctly, it just doesn't hurt. Well, it didn't hurt for me initially anyway. And it just felt like such overwhelmed closeness with the baby, and it was so lovely. But once I went to the maternity ward, again, I still can't feel my lower part of my body. So I've gone in there, sharing it with another lady who's just given birth, who also had a C-section. And I'm having to ask the midwives for a lot of things because I can't lift myself or anything like that. I've got my baby next to me in his little cot, and he's within reach. So I can bring him up to my chest as and when he wants cuddles. When I want cuddles, because I wanted a lot of them initially, especially being in the hospital overnight on my own. It's big thing for me and my partner, our first child together, and him having to go, it was just quite hard for him and me. I wanted him to be there to experience our child for hours and hours. Instead, we just got a couple of hours together, and then it was just me and my baby and the hospital staff for the rest of the night. So in that time, I called the midwives to help me change my baby's nappies and stuff like that, because I wasn't strong enough to sit up to change them, because I was still waiting for all the anaesthetic to wear off and things like that. So whilst that was happening, slowly regaining feeling in my legs and in my toes and wiggling my toes, thinking, okay, I could probably stand soon. As soon as I could, I asked the midwife if I could stand up from the bed, and I thought I was doing quite well. I was like, okay, I've got this. Stood up and then felt really wobbly and just like, oh, I need to sit back down. It's just too much. But I'm glad I did that, because I was seeing what my body was capable of. And they advise you to get moving as soon as you can, as soon as you feel able to. And I didn't want to be so bedridden, because I wanted to do a lot of things with the baby. I wanted to change his nappies. I wanted to be able to move around the room and get out as soon as I could, really, because no one wants to stay in hospital longer than they should. And I also wanted to get home to see my partner so we could spend more time with the baby and just do it together. So in that time, midwives are helping me as soon as I could sit up properly. Midwives come and be like, oh, he needs his nappy changed. And I said, I'll just pass from my bag. I'll do it all. And the first poo was like a tar poo, just black. I didn't expect this. I'd read about it, but I hadn't expected how sticky and messy this poo would be. And he had a few of them in that time throughout the whole night. And I think I had an hour's sleep overall, just broken up into a few minutes at a time. One, because I was really anxious, because I was worried about him, because, you just worry about them with like SIDS and stuff like that. I was just really kind of anxious anything could go wrong. And I just felt like I need to watch over him all the time. So I didn't get too much sleep. And then he was very good. He didn't cry too much. He just wanted a lot of cuddles, which was lucky for me. There was, bless the lady that was in the room with me, with her baby. She was just crying. And I was able to breastfeed my baby throughout that whole night. But come the next day at 5 a.m, he had his feed, but then he wouldn't latch. And I had a lot of trouble getting him to latch. I had midwives coming in, like breastfeeding experts as well, really helpful, just in different positions to help him latch. And I also tried hand expressing as well into little syringes so that I could feed him that way. But one, it was a struggle to get anything out for the syringes, and two, he just didn't want to latch on. So it got too early afternoon. I was waiting to see if I'd be discharged, but I could see my baby was getting very hungry. And it was just really stressful with breastfeeding. Hats off to anyone who just really pushed through to make it happen, but I really struggled. And some people just struggles with actual breastfeeding. It's hard, and I take my hat off to anyone who's done it, because it is a massive achievement to do. But it got to about, I don't know, 1 or 2 in the afternoon, and my baby hadn't fed since 5 a.m. From my breast. So I had some ready-made milk with me. And I thought, I don't want my baby going longer without food because he's getting stressed that he can't latch and he's losing interest in it. So I opted to give him bottle-fed milk, powder milk, that's what it's called. But the one I had was ready-made. So he had that, and he ate the whole thing, and he was starving for it. So he really enjoyed having that, and I just thought, my baby's full as long as he's getting some nutrients, and whether it's from the bottle or my breast, as long as he's getting fed. I thought that was the best thing, really. It doesn't matter how they're getting it as long as they're getting fed. So anyone out there who's struggling to breastfeed or feels guilty because they couldn't breastfeed, or switched to bottle feeding because it was very difficult, I completely relate to you, because it is difficult. And I think the main thing, don't worry about any prejudices people put, like, oh, breast is best and stuff like that. As long as the baby's getting fed, I think that's the main thing that you should ever be worrying about. Is my baby being fed enough? Are they getting enough nutrients from what they're doing? Are they comfortable? Making sure they're not stressed when they're eating, because that is just all that matters, really. That you're comfortable, that your baby is content. So did that, and then the next day after C-section, I was able to come home about 4 p.m, and luckily enough, I think they would, if I chose to stick to breastfeeding, I think they would have kept me in longer, because he still wasn't getting enough from my breasts. And I think 2 weeks into me healing from my C-section, I started just projecting some milk from my boobs. I just started leaking, and I thought, oh, maybe there's something going to come out of there, because I was so weak from the C-section. I didn't realise how much of a toll it would take on my body. I knew it would be hard, but I didn't realise it would be this hard for me to sit up, to actively do things. Picking up the baby, it's just difficult anyway, because I say you should never lift anything that's heavier than the baby after you're healing from your C-section. And I didn't. I was very careful, but I did suffer a couple of infections on my C-section scar after giving birth to him, which weren't too bad. I had antibiotics, and they managed to sort it all out, and it's not like it ripped open. There's a lot worse things could have happened, but it's just where I had dissolvable stitches, and I think a couple of them had popped open, so that just allowed bacteria to grow, really. So yeah, that happened, and then actually lifting the baby was fine, but he's just getting heavier and heavier, because he was a big baby, estimated big baby anyway, and he just came out at £8.11, which is a nice healthy weight for him. He just looked all chunky, and really nice, really sturdy. So yeah, I was bottle feeding him, and when I started having breast milk leaking from my breasts about 2 weeks after giving birth to him, I felt a bit better, because I felt a bit stronger. I thought, I'll try expressing. I'll try getting some milk together so that I can give it to him in the bottle, because I didn't want him to get nipple confusion of going from bottle to breast, and back and forth, because I thought that's not fair on him, from my experience with him anyway, because I wanted him just to have one, just because I'm not well versed in giving both. I'm not well versed in babies in general, because this is the first baby I've had in my life that I'm solely looking after. I haven't had babies within the family or anything like that. So it's very, very new to me. So just to be comfortable with what I was doing, I thought I'll try and express to give him a bottle, and so that he can have a mixture of both. And if I can get the milk supply up on, from my breasts, then it might be a bit easier, and I can at least try and give him that. I tried hand expressing and I got barely anything. I was massaging, I was doing all these things that, the midwives said about techniques on stimulating milk flow. I had nothing. So I tried it, it didn't work, and it gave me less stress than just having the ready-made milk, and and we soon switched to powder after that because it's a bit cheaper. But we still use ready-made if we're going out somewhere, just for ease, so we can easily make up the bottles. So overall, I was really pleased that I had a C-section. It took all the stress away from me, in knowing that it was planned, and I knew what time I had to be there, and it just felt very systematic for me. Whereas I knew I'd be very stressed in having a labour, because we had a couple of scares leading up to the C-section date, in worrying, am I going into labour? So I, really helpful, called a pregnancy line, spoke to some very knowledgeable people on the phone about what I was experiencing, Braxton Hicks, leaking fluid, I had a massively swollen ankle, so I was worried it was pre-eclampsia. But it just ended up being, I had fat ankles because I was pregnant, and they soon went down after I gave birth. But after the C-section, just going back to that, once you've had a C-section, you have to inject yourself or have someone do it for you with, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a fluid that helps to prevent blood clots in your legs, because I think you're at more risk of getting them in your legs after the C-section. I don't know why. I don't know if it's something that they put in anaesthetic or anything like that, but I just know I had to do it for 9 days to inject myself in the top of my thighs with this, or my stomach, but I did it on my thighs because it was easier. I could see what I was doing, with a very long needle and the fluid. So it wasn't too bad. Just managed to get it done. It's a very sharp needle, so you just have to turn away, put it in, and then it's done. So I had that, and had to wear compression socks for about a couple of weeks. I didn't realise I had to do that straight after I came out of hospital. It's when I saw the midwife the following week with my baby for his weigh-in. She said about wearing, because I mentioned about my ankles being still swollen, and they weren't going down. So she said about wearing the compression socks, have to wear them until the swelling goes down, really. So it took a couple of weeks, put the compression socks on, mainly at night, because of my feet are up. And it soon went down, and it was all fine. I didn't realise how slim my ankles were until they just went back down. So I was very pleased they went. So on my channel, I'll be talking more about what my experiences are, because as a new mum, not having babies in my family on my partner's or my side, this is the first grandchild for both of our parents. All very new. I had to Google and research a lot on how to be a mum and what I needed to do. So I just want to share with everyone what my experiences were, what I wanted to know more about, and just put more information out there for new mums to be, on what it is to be a mum, how do we do it, and just, I'd love feedback from you guys about your experiences as a new mum, or if you're pregnant, what you're going through. If you've got any comments about what you'd like to see, just message in the comments, let me know. Please like, subscribe, and enjoy.